Josh Brown, tell me about hot hilfs in my area.
He says 2 seconds before dropping that joke, Josh Brown, I've got a good way to go into this.
Silent Hilf, mate.
Silent Hilfs in your area. Scott Telford, I wish I could, my friend. But there's no new information about that, and it's worrying me, put simply. Over the weekend, I played Silent Hill: The Short Message, which is kind of just dropped as a surprise free experience after the PlayStation State of Play a few weeks ago. I guess they were trying to, have the same impact that PT had almost exactly 10 years ago. And it hasn't quite impacted the zeitgeist in the same way, but it's still worth talking about. It's still a really interesting game. Mm-hmm. It's no PT by any means in terms of scales or quality, but it's kind of fascinating, I think, about what it establishes for Konami's approach to Silent Hill going forward. And before I get into the nitty-gritty, I kind of just want to know what you think generally about Silent Hilfs in your area and every other project that's currently announced, because it's not really, I don't think, gone down as well as it seemed like it would when these were first announced in 2022.
I think it's weird, man. Like, I want to do this whole video on the state of Silent Hill in general and talk about the new demo, or the full game, I guess it kind of is.
Full game, yeah.
PT adjacent thing. I think I'm more positive on it overall than the average person. I don't mind Bloober Team's past works. I really like Observer, and I quite like a small team getting a go at like a certain franchise and seeing what they do with it. However, it has been interesting watching the rollout of like the Silent Hill 2. Well, they showed the gameplay footage of Silent Hill 2. It did look pretty bad. It looked undercooked or whatever, quick time events, things like that. Bloober Team's own CEO, I think, getting out there going, we didn't do the marketing. That was all on Konami. Don't blame us. And then the interview being removed, and it's just like Konami be Konamiing again. But I feel like overall, I still have the promise. I still have the hope for it. Because I really like when they initially announced everything. Was it 2 years ago now?
Yeah, October 2022, definitely 2022.
And it was like they had that live stream. It was nicely produced. I was like, you put a bit of effort into this thing.
It was all right.
They had a different backdrop and all that. And I was like, that's cool. We got a different backdrop, by the way, because we're in the wrestling studio. And I was like, they care. Like, after this long, the whole franchise has been dead for so long. And it seems like they're doing it right. And then the more we've seen of each individual project, the worse it's gotten. So I know we're going to get to each individual thing, but I don't want to talk about the other one first. I forget its name. It's not called the Silent Message. It's
the Short Message.
That's the one.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that isn't necessarily directly related to Silent Hill F, which is the other kind of main game that we haven't seen much from yet. But there are some links between the two. Silent Hill F is set in 1960s Japan.
Yes.
It's about like these monsters that seem to be kind of sprouting flowers, essentially, which is a motif in Silent Hill: The Short Message, as you're haunted by this monster that has cherry blossoms grown out of them, and that's a motif that's kind of talked about as the game goes on. So that's the kind of tenuous link where, but the Short Message is set in the modern day. Like I said, Silent Hill F is set in the past. There's something there, but they are by different developers, and it kind of, the Short Message, I think, does a good job in getting us thinking about what Silent Hill means. And full spoilers for this demo, I guess let's just call it, from here on out, because I need to talk about something called the Silent Hill phenomenon. I don't know if you've come across this yet.
I was doing it's not in real life.
This is the big sort of question mark over the Short Message, as you can pick up a newspaper clipping that talks about this thing called the Silent Hill phenomenon, which is something in universe that has been essentially discovered by doctors. It's kind of something similar to psychosis, and it stems from what happened back in Silent Hill, the actual town, 20 years ago, or how many ever years it was. And it's about people like with these kind of like repressed traumas and fractured reality, seeing these things that might not be there or they might be there. So they've essentially medicalized the other world of Silent Hill. And that's been a little bit divisive online, because obviously Silent Hill is a place, it's a location. For the longest time, the idea was like you go there either literally or you go there in the other world, and that's where things go wrong. But now the Silent Hill phenomenon allows the franchise to go to 1960s Japan, to go to Eastern Europe, where the Short Message is set to essentially do Silent Hills outside of Silent Hill. I think that's a pretty decent idea, to be honest.
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, if it's going down the horror route, like the most unfathomable horror tends to, at least to me, be the most effective. So the more you draw rules around it, and the more you have an origin story for the idea of what Silent Hill is as an IP, that has to be very deftly handled. But at the same time, it does work as the whole, let's come up with a toolbox of ideas, a brand bible for Silent Hill, and give that to different teams and see what they do with it. At least there's a guiding light to that in a way that might work. There's a potential that it works out the best and all these things feel cohesive even if they are from completely different teams.
For me personally, I think it's vague enough to not ruin anything. Like, you're not pinning anything down too much, because this at the end of the day still could be an interpretation. Like, just because it's stemmed from a medical sort of definition doesn't mean they're 100% right, if that makes sense. It doesn't mean that it's not supernatural or it is supernatural in nature. Like, there's still a lot of vagary around it. It's more or less an excuse, I think, for them to set Silent Hill in different time periods and different have different locations and have different characters and dive into different themes outside of what we kind of already know, which is, to be fair, what the first two games especially did. I know Silent Hill 3 is way more directly connected to 1, but 2 kind of used the town as a platform for someone else's personal journey, bringing in new villains and what they mean to this character specifically. There's that iconic line, I want to say from Silent Hill 3, maybe Silent Hill 4, where someone asks one of the characters, like, wait, you see monsters? Like, because they're seeing something else because maybe because of Silent Hill. Like, there's always been that vagary to it. And I think this just allows all of these different developers that we're going to talk about to put their own new stamp on the franchise, but I can see why it has been a little bit divisive.
That's what I was going to say, is like that idea of like putting a new stamp on it. This, again, I forget the name of it.
The short message.
The short message. It's not the silent message, my brain, but I'll keep calling it that.
It would be if it came to my phone, because I got no notifications on it at all.
Doesn't reply at all. Doesn't, never, just no point. But with this thing, that whole idea of like putting feet forward, is this a confident step forward, even if it's if it is a bit stumbly? Like, it feels like the reception's been quite mixed to almost non-existent in regard if the comparison is PT. Like, it's like that whole idea of like there's a bunch of Silent Hill projects in the works and people are curious about them, but I don't feel like this thing that I forgot the name of again,
the short message,
that one has been received in a way that has people talking. It's just kind of there.
That's kind of it. I like the short message. I think it's pretty good, but it's not Silent Hill is back. It's not this is the template for the franchise going forward. It's not this is why you have to care. This is why non-fans have to care, in the same way that PT arguably was, with the amount of star power involved, but just because of how good of a horror showcase that was. Like, the main issue I have with the short message is it's not that scary, at least for me, and I'm someone who can easily get scared by horror games. If you ever watch me play something like Madison or Visage, I am pooping my pants every 2 seconds, and I wasn't really doing that with the short message. But what this demo does really well is atmosphere. Like, it looks phenomenal, I think.
Okay.
The actual environmental design on display is incredible. The facial animations and some of the character models don't fare as well, but considering it's a first-person game, it really nails that sense of immersion and atmosphere, and I like the idea of this desolate tower block where the game is set that has been, graffitied over, has all of this wreckage, essentially. That is a compelling space. I know we might not revisit it necessarily, but if that's a template at least one of these other Silent Hill games is going to take, do that first person thing before a full game, I would be here for that. I think it doesn't handle its themes necessarily as sensitively or as well as I would like. It's very much a game about teens and self-harm and, suicide, essentially. And you get big splash screens about that. I think it does a decent job, but you could never call it perfect, I don't think. But it is at least tapping into what Silent Hill kind of was all about, in that sort of human grief element, the sort of taking what is a nightmare in real life and then juxtaposing it through this more supernatural lens. So it's a bit hit and miss with that. The whole project is just a bit hit and miss. For everything you can praise, there's something else where you think that drags it down a bit. So it's a tough one, because you can't come out with a title like Silent Hill short message has just killed the franchise, or it's just saved the franchise, because it's very much more of a a toe forward than I was expecting than PT, which was like, hey, Silent Hills, there's 2 of them.
Yes, PT was like, everyone look at this. Look how incredible this thing is, the fact that it was free to play. Like, short message is free as well. But yeah, because I didn't fire the question back to you about where you're at with the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because I feel like overall, the way you're describing this, I assume that this is the best bit of momentum they've had.
Yes.
If you were comparing to general thoughts on Silent Hill 2 Remake, and the sort of Silent Hill Ascension was like an absolute fire.
Yeah.
In the worst possible way. So like, where are you at on the thing overall? And then I guess there's more games to talk about anyway.
I think some of these games will be good. I don't know if any of them will be great because honestly, I don't think the approach has changed too much for Konami compared to where they were in the late 2000s and very, very early 2010s, because all of the studios that they've sought out to create new Silent Hill experiences, you couldn't really call any of them big studios or AAA studios. You know, they've drafted in a lot of support studios or teams that have worked on DLC, like the developers of the short message. They've worked on mostly ports before. Silent Hill F, again, another small team. I think they worked on the multiplayer modes for Resident Evil Reverse and Resident Evil, the other one, Revelations. No, not that one. That was an actual Resistance.
There you go.
The multiplayer one. So they're not teams even necessarily known for horror in some cases.
That's a weird beat.
It's kind of like Konami has gone to these smaller teams and like almost not giving them a big break, but they're allowing them to work as the main developers on an established IP and not just be a support studio. So I kind of champion that, but I think with that knowledge comes tempered expectations. Even Bloober Team, who we seem to like way more than the general public, they're known for making 6 out of 10s, 7 out of 10s, games that I think have a lot of pros, but like the short message, which they obviously didn't make, have a lot of flaws as well and have a lot of drawbacks and couldn't be described as a perfect game by any means.
I think that's the thing with the double-edged sword of giving a big IP to a smaller team. It's like, oh my god, we get this big jump, we can do this huge thing, we'll be on the world stage, everyone's going to be talking about us as the next developer of Silent Hill. The flip side of that to me is the corporate side where they save a bunch of money because they're paying a smaller team, they're not paying a certain prestige wage that would go alongside more veteran team, more veteran staff, etc. There has been like a lot of conversation around previous key members of Silent Hill, like getting out there on I was going to say getting out there on Twitter. I forget the name of the dude that did come up with Pyramid Head, but he literally tweeted saying, I wish I never created Pyramid Head, for how sort of memed and over the top that stuff's become. Because there is a rumor of Pyramid Head DLC or whatever it is for the Silent Hill 2 remake, or some sort of Pyramid Head chapter, and making that more of the sort of mascot of the franchise. And that franchising of Silent Hill, that memeing of Silent Hill, is something that came through in Silent Hill Ascension as well, where you can unlock a sticker that just says it's trauma and just whack that in the live chat. It's a weird approach. Like, you can see the Konami business end where it's like, what do the kids like about Silent Hill? It's like, well, it's James Sunderland and it's a traumatic story and it's whatever. Okay, let's meme that. We'll business it. We'll market it. We'll PR it. And then you've got the small teams doing their best. You've got Ryokushio 6 doing a main installment. Who's a known individual. Like, assuming his version would have a lot of authored intent to it. But it's weird. I do like the overall approach. I still have the hope. I don't know why.
That's it, right?
I have the
agree.
hope.
I still have the hope because I do think the idea of giving the franchise to teams who are, have the hunger, have the drive, have the creativity, like you mentioned, to make something unique and special is better than just getting a bunch of remakes of Silent Hill 2, 3, and 1, and 4, and maybe even Downpour. Who knows? Yeah. As much as I would like that, you want to see the franchise come back and be new and original in the way that so many people loved way back when. And to their credit, I still think the trailer for Silent Hill F looks really good, really interesting to have that setting and those kind of visuals in a Silent Hill game. I'm personally really looking forward to Silent Hill Townfall, which is the upcoming game that is published by Annapurna Interactive and developed, I can't remember the studio, but they're the people who did Observation, not Observer,
that game's
a few
awesome.
Years ago, the space set puzzle game.
Yes.
Kind of horror game as well, absolutely incredible. I'm really interested to see how they can put their stamp on the franchise with those game mechanics or styles of gameplay in mind. I just think I'm tentatively optimistic about it. Just every time I play something from modern Silent Hill or see a new trailer, like that gameplay trailer you mentioned for Silent Hill 2, I'm just at a strange position with it because it's not the big comeback I expected in 2022, but it's also not bad. And it's like,
just
maybe that's all right.
Yeah, it's just kind of there. I feel like you can see the various strands of how they're approaching it, where you've got the success of modern Resident Evil remakes, you've got the over-shoulder camera, the more action-oriented approach. That's what Silent Hill 2 Remake's gameplay trailer felt like it was chasing.
Yeah.
Where it's like we've actionized Silent Hill 2, and look at this QuickTime event, and look at all these different scenes and everything. It's just a bit forced. I think there's a lot to pick from in terms of the amount of projects in the works, but the ones that we've seen so far have been 2 missteps and a stumble. Well, maybe not a stumble entirely for a short message, but it's still not as phenomenal as it could be.
I think it's going to be a question of these developers can do as good as they possibly can, but is Konami going to get in Konami's way? Because it seems like you mentioned the comments from Bloober Team CEO who said, the trailer that they put out isn't necessarily representative of what they are, how they are approaching Silent Hill 2, or what's at the core of Silent Hill 2. And you had developers talking to people on Twitter saying, look, Konami's in charge of the marketing and the messaging. Yeah. We don't really have a hand in that. And it's like, okay, Konami, you can have the best game ever, right? And you can mismanage it and you can mismarket it. And based on Konami's history, looking at you, eFootball, looking at you, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, I just don't know if from the top down they still know what they're doing in the gaming space, because they are certainly better than they were in 2015.
Yeah.
But does that mean they're good, Scott? I don't think so.
They've put a few feet forward with the likes of the TMNT collection, the Castlevania collections, which are good.
True.
They're promising. But the amount, how many things have we got for Silent Hill now? Because I literally have lost count. Like, there's the Silent Hill 2 remake.
Yes.
There's the Silent Hill's in my area.
Silent Hill's in my area.
And then there's Townfall.
Yep.
We've got Silent Hill Ascension, which is still going.
Yep. And then we've got the short message, and we've got the movie on top of that.
Right.
And apparently, this is from Dust Golem, who's usually a Resident Evil leaker. They are suggesting that Townfall is actually an anthology series by a bunch of indie devs, and there are more of those in the works. So there are 5 we know about, 5 that exist, and potentially many more on top of that.
I mean, it makes sense that Silent Hill should be as omnipresent as it used to be across the 2000s. I feel like it struggled a bit at Silent Hill 3 onwards.
Yes.
Like that the initial 1-2 punch, it was just, there were such strong identifiable games. The atmosphere was phenomenal. People still replay the original Silent Hill 2 to this day because it's just such one of the best games of all time, one of the best experiences of all time. Can they ever get there? I don't necessarily think so, but I have the hope that we'll get one of these will at least be worthwhile.
That's the hope. One of them's gotta be good. It's just the law of averages, surely. No,
hope so.
You mentioned there about Silent Hill should be as ubiquitous as it was, but I think the issue was in the 2000s and in the early 2010s, it was Silent Hill games were coming out all the time. Like I said, you got Downpour, you got Shattered Memories, you've got all of these spin-offs and continuations, and it was always there. And no one cared outside the diehards, and everyone used to say, Silent Hill needed to be better than this. It needed to return to the glory days of Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, even 4. And we never really got it. And I guess my biggest worry is that while I'm grateful to have Silent Hill back, we just go back to that late period again where Silent Hill is there, but unfortunately no one cares on the same level people care about Resident Evil.